Your doorbell camera is supposed to give you peace of mind. It's an unblinking guardian, watching over your home while you sleep, designed to show you if it's a package delivery or a friend stopping by. But what happens when that little camera, the one meant to keep you safe, becomes a window into your worst nightmare? What happens when the motion alert that wakes you in the dead of night isn't a stray cat, but something far more sinister? These 5 accounts are pulled from the experiences of real people, and they reveal the terrifying encounters that can happen after the sun goes down. They're a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors are the ones that unfold just a few feet from where we're supposed to feel the safest. From deranged strangers to potential home invaders, these are true horror stories you have to see to believe. They prove that sometimes the most frightening thing in the world is finding out who's really there. Section 1, The Porch Pacer. Kicking things off at number 5 is a story that shows just how fast a sense of security can fall apart. It comes from a homeowner who, as a retired police officer, thought she'd seen it all. Her training had prepared her for the worst of humanity. But nothing could have prepared her for the night she became a prisoner in her own home, watching a bizarre and frightening ordeal play out on her front porch. The night started like any other. It was late, the house was quiet, and the neighborhood was blanketed in suburban silence. Then, her phone buzzed a motion alert from her doorbell camera. Annoyed but not alarmed, she figured it was just an animal. When she opened the app, the grainy night vision footage showed a woman she didn't recognize, simply standing on her porch. At first, the woman wasn't doing anything threatening. She just stood there, swaying a little. The homeowner watched, her curiosity turning to unease. Who was this person? And what could she possibly want at this hour? As she kept watching the live feed, the woman began to pace, back and forth, from one end of the small porch to the other. Her movements were erratic, her gaze unfocused. For 15 agonizing minutes, the pacing continued, a slow, deliberate rhythm of dread that echoed in the silent house. The homeowner's unease boiled over into real fear. This wasn't normal. This wasn't someone who was lost. This felt like a prelude to something awful. Deciding to act, she activated the 2-way intercom. Her voice, firm and clear, cut through the night. "Can I help you?" The pacing stopped. The woman froze and stared directly into the camera lens. Even in the low-res footage, her eyes seemed to burn with a strange intensity. She claimed a friend of hers lived there. The homeowner, relying on her police training, kept her voice calm but firm. She explained that no one by that name lived there and told her to leave the property immediately. But she didn't leave. Instead, her entire demeanor shifted. The strange, quiet behavior was replaced by a rising aggression. She started banging on the door, the thuds causing the homeowner's heart to pound. She moved to the windows, hammering her fists against the glass, her voice getting louder as she demanded to be let inside. The homeowner's training kicked in. Through the intercom, she announced she was armed and that the police had been called, hoping it would be enough to scare the intruder away. It had the opposite effect. The woman became enraged. The banging intensified, the front door groaning under the assault. The homeowner retreated from the door, her hand shaking as she clutched her phone. The 911 dispatcher on the line. She was now a spectator to her own home invasion, watching the glowing screen as the figure on her porch grew more and more violent. She later said, "The thought that crossed her mind was chilling. I came very close to shooting her. Just as it seemed the door or a window would give way, Flashing red and blue lights washed over the house. The police had arrived just seconds after the woman escalated to actively trying to break in. The footage shows an instant transformation. The moment an officer commanded her to stop, the aggression melted away, replaced by a diesel confusion. The woman, later identified as a local teacher, suspected to be under the influence, was taken into custody for vandalism and attempted breaking and entering. For the homeowner, the arrest brought little comfort. Those 15 minutes spent watching a stranger try to force their way into her sanctuary left a lasting scar. Her home, once a place of safety, was now the setting of her own personal horror story, a reminder of just how thin the line between order and chaos really is. Section 2, The Glare of Fury. Our fourth story is a chilling reminder that you don't need a weapon to inspire absolute terror. Sometimes, a look is all it takes. This account comes from a homeowner who had an encounter so psychologically disturbing, they left their home the very next day. It wasn't about what the person on the porch did, but the sheer, inexplicable malice they projected. The evening was winding down. The homeowner had just gotten back from a party and was settling into their quiet, dark house. It was that strange, late hour when the world outside seems to be holding its breath. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sharp, insistent chime of the doorbell. Puzzled, they checked the live feed from their camera. Standing on the porch was a woman they'd never seen before. She wasn't doing anything overtly threatening, just standing there, her hands hovering near the doorbell. The homeowner waited, expecting her to realize she had the wrong house and leave. She didn't move. Then, she rang it again, and again. The chime echoed through the house, louder and more demanding each time, amplifying the homeowner's growing dread. Through the intercom, they asked who was there and what they wanted. No response, only the ringing, which had now become a frantic, rhythmic pounding on the small plastic button. And then came the laugh. It started low, a soft chuckle almost lost to the night air, but it grew, building into a full-throated laugh that was completely devoid of humor. It was the sound of pure, unhinged madness. The homeowner watched, frozen, as the woman threw her head back and laughed at the sky. When the laughter died down, she leaned in close to the camera. That's when the homeowner saw her eyes. Even through the distorted fisheye lens, the look on her face was one of pure, indescribable fury. It was a glare that burned with a cold, hateful fire. It was a look that, as the homeowner later described it, penetrated my eyes and gave me chills. There was no weapon, no threats, just an unarmed woman, a doorbell, and a stare that promised a kind of violence that was entirely psychological. The homeowner felt a primal fear, a terror that went beyond the logical fear of a break-in. This felt personal, predatory. The woman on the porch wasn't just trying to get in. She was trying to dismantle their sense of safety from the outside in. They didn't call the police. In that moment of panic, what would they even say? There's a woman on my porch, looking at me. It felt insane. So they backed away from the door, watching the live feed as the woman continued her bizarre ritual of furious ringing and soul-chilling glares. Eventually, as suddenly as she appeared, she stopped. She gave the camera one last, long look, a faint and cruel smile on her lips, then turned and vanished into the darkness. The house was silent again, but the silence was different. It was heavy, suffocating. The homeowner spent the rest of the night wide awake. The image of that woman's face burned into their mind. The next morning, they packed a bag They couldn't spend another night in that house. The psychological assault had been a success. The woman with the furious glare had, without ever setting foot inside, managed to evict them from their own home. Section 3, The Demonic Faces. Coming in at number 3 is a story that blurs the line between a home invasion and a waking nightmare. Sourced from a personal account shared in the deep corners of the internet, it describes an event so bizarre and horrifying, it left the homeowner questioning his own sanity. The story begins late one night in a small apartment. The resident, let's call him Mark, was home alone when a loud, aggressive banging started on his front door. This wasn't a polite knock. It was a frantic pounding that seemed to shake the entire door frame. Mark rushed to check his doorbell camera, and the image that greeted him was both confusing and deeply unsettling. On his doorstep stood a group of young girls, no older than teenagers. But there was something profoundly wrong. As he stared at the screen, their faces seemed to warp and distort. The night vision camera was rendering their features into something monstrous. Their eyes appeared as black, empty sockets, and their mouths twisted into grotesque, unnatural smiles. Mark tried to rationalize it. It had to be a glitch, a weird trick of the light. He used the intercom, his voice trembling, and told them to leave, pleading that they had the wrong apartment. His pleas were met with a chorus of childish sing-song voices that horribly mismatched the demonic faces on his screen. They asked for candy. They giggled, and then, in a chilling unison that sounded eerily like his wife's voice, they said, "Won't you let us in?" Terror seized him. The banging on the door intensified, the force of their fists sounding less like teenagers and more like a battering ram. He described it as feeling like a car was hitting the door over and over again. The sound was a deafening assault designed to break not just the door, but his will. He collapsed to the floor, covering his ears and screaming for them to go away. The last thing he remembered seeing on his phone was their faces, melting and shifting in a way that defied all logic. He fainted from sheer terror. He awoke hours later, sprawled on the floor as the first rays of morning light filtered in. The apartment was quiet. For a moment, he thought it must have all been a horrible, stress-induced nightmare. He stumbled to the front door, half expecting to see it damaged, but it was pristine. Not a mark, not a dent. Relief washed over him. It was just a dream, a terrible, vivid dream. And then, the knocking started again. He froze. It was the same frantic, aggressive pounding, with a sickening sense of dread. He opened the camera app. They were back. The same girls, with the same distorted demonic faces, were on his porch in broad daylight, smiling their grotesque smiles as they began their assault on his door once more. He didn't faint this time. He was trapped in a cycle of horror he couldn't understand and couldn't escape. The account ends on a note of despair. Unable to break his lease, he was forced to endure the torment until he could finally move. He never understood what happened, whether it was paranormal, a cruel prank, or a break from reality. All he knew was that for him, the nightmare was real, and it was waiting right outside his door. These stories are a terrifying look into the dark side of home security. If these accounts are sending a chill down your spine, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe for more true horror stories. Your support helps us keep bringing you these unsettling tales. Now, let's get back to the countdown. Section 4, The Sleep Tight Stalker. Our number 2 story takes us from the front porch and into the home itself, revealing a level of violation that is deeply personal and profoundly disturbing. It's about a stalker who used technology and psychological warfare to turn a person's home into their own twisted horror show. This account, shared by a terrified apartment resident, shows how the fear of the unknown can be the most potent weapon of all. The story starts at 5 a.m. The resident was asleep when their phone buzzed with a ring notification. Groggy, they checked the alert. The camera outside their apartment door showed a figure standing in the dimly lit hallway, wearing a blank, white, expressionless mask that completely erased their identity. In their hands, they held up a small, handwritten sign. The message was simple and chilling: sleep tight. An adrenaline jolt shot through the resident. They were wide awake now, heart hammering. Who was this person? Was it a prank, a threat? They watched the figure for another moment before it turned and silently walked away. Shaken, but trying to rationalize it as a bizarre prank, the resident tried to calm down. It was just some weirdo in the hallway. They were safe inside their locked apartment, but the feeling of being watched lingered. A short while later, they got up to get dressed. As they reached into their closet, they noticed something that wasn't there before: a small, one-folded piece of paper tucked into a jacket pocket. Their blood ran cold. How did that get there? With trembling hands, they unfolded it. On the paper were 3 words: "Look behind you." In that instant, the security of their locked apartment was shattered. The person from the hallway hadn't just been outside. They had been inside. They had been in this very room. Panic set in, fighting the urge to scream. The resident slowly turned, their eyes scanning the bedroom for any sign of an intruder. And then they saw it. Peeking through a small gap in the window blinds was a sliver of white. It was the mask. The figure was outside, standing at their bedroom window, staring in. The resident fled the room, running to their roommates for help, babbling about the masked figure and the note. Their roommates, however, were skeptical, dismissing it as a bad dream fueled by the 5 a.m. notification. They saw nothing at the window, and the note could have been there for weeks. Frustrated and terrified, the resident felt completely alone. The proof they needed came later. The doorbell camera was linked to a shared account, and the resident showed their roommates the saved footage from 5 a.m. There, in the grainy video, was the masked figure holding the "sleep tight" sign. The roommates could no longer deny it, but their reaction wasn't what the resident expected. As they planned to break their lease and move out, the doorbell rang. The resident caught their roommates sharing a strange, creepy grin before answering the door. A horrifying realization dawned on them. The roommates weren't just skeptical. They might have been complicit. Were they in on it? Did they know the stalker? The resident never got the answers. They fled the apartment, breaking their lease and leaving everything behind. The story ends without resolution, leaving the identity of the masked stalker a mystery. It's a story that proves sometimes the call really is coming from inside the house, and the people you trust most might be the ones opening the door for the monsters. Section 5, The All-Seeing Eye. Our number 1 story is perhaps the most insidious of all, because the threat isn't on the porch or at the window. The threat is the camera itself. This isn't just one incident, but a documented pattern of technological terror, where the device meant to provide security becomes a tool for constant, invasive harassment. This is the horror of the hacked camera. For thousands of users, the peace of mind promised by video doorbells was shattered. Due to major security failures, hackers were able to gain control of people's accounts and their cameras. This wasn't just a data breach, it was a violation of privacy in the most sacred of spaces, the home. The Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, eventually charged the company Ring for these failures, which exposed consumers to spying and harassment. Hackers, often using passwords stolen from other websites in credential stuffing attacks, logged into user accounts and could see everything. They could watch live video feeds from cameras in bedrooms and even children's nurseries. And most terrifyingly, they could use the two-way talk feature to speak directly to the people inside. The reports that emerged were the stuff of nightmares. Victims were taunted and threatened by disembodied voices coming from their own security cameras. In one of the most widely reported cases, an 8-year-old girl was in her bedroom when a man's voice suddenly spoke through the camera, claiming to be Santa Claus. The voice encouraged her to misbehave and destroy her room, leaving the little girl confused and terrified, screaming for her mother. The family had only owned the device for 4 days. The psychological toll was immense. Hackers used information they learned from watching families to terrorize them further, creating a constant state of anxiety. And while widespread reports don't link these hacks to physical home invasions, a hacker would know with certainty when a house was empty, making it a perfect target. In May of 2023, the FTC's complaint alleged Ring had failed to implement basic security like multi-factor authentication for years, leaving about 55,000 U.S. customers vulnerable to these hacks. The complaint also revealed shocking internal problems. It alleged that Ring gave its employees and even third-party contractors dangerously broad access to customers' private videos. In one case, a male employee was found to have viewed thousands of videos from cameras female users had placed in intimate spaces like their bathrooms and bedrooms. Public trust was shaken again in mid-2025 when panic spread across social media. Thousands of Ring users suddenly reported seeing numerous unauthorized logins on their accounts, all strangely dated May 28th. Screenshots flooded TikTok and Reddit, showing long lists of unrecognized devices. The company later stated this was a visual bug from a back-end update that displayed past login dates incorrectly, insisting no security breach had occurred. But for many users already wary of the company's history, the explanation, which they often heard about from social media first, did little to calm their fears. This saga of the all-seeing eye is our most terrifying story because it's real and widespread. We invite these devices into our homes to protect us, but without proper security, they can become portals for unseen tormentors. The monster isn't just at the door. It's watching through it, speaking through it, and turning our safest spaces into theaters of fear. The front door is a powerful symbol. It's the line we draw between our private world and the chaos outside. These stories show what happens when that line is breached, not always by force, but by a simple motion alert in the middle of the night. From the psychological terror of a hateful stare to the utter violation of a hacked camera. The horror is real because the setting is our own home. It's a chilling reminder to be vigilant, secure our accounts, and remember that sometimes the most frightening things are waiting just outside, hoping we'll answer the door. If you have your own creepy doorbell camera story, share it in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring the darkness on the edge of our ordinary lives, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what we find next. Stay safe out there.